But one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit on Spooky South Coast over the last decade, and one of the things that has kind of resonated with our audience, both locally and around the world via the streaming and the podcast, is the Freetown State Forest and some of the things that have happened in there over the years, just the strange phenomena, not only the paranormal stuff, but the true crime stuff that happens in there as well. And one of the most notorious cases was the murder of Mary Lou Arruda in 1978, the discovery of her body tied to a tree, and the subsequent trials, multiple, of James Cadieux before he was finally convicted of the murders and remained in prison. And he passed away this past week. He'd been sick, I guess, for a little while and passed away. So this has kind of brought up a lot of memories of this for people. So we have some special guests joining us on the line. I'll introduce them all quickly, and we'll get right into the discussion because we'll probably go with this until about the news, maybe a little bit longer, but certainly we'll welcome some of your calls later on in the hour as well. All right, so joining us we have Aaron Cadieux, who is the co-director of the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and he is the one of the filmmakers that chronicled this as part of that story. Good morning, Aaron. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and happy anniversary to you, my friend.
Thank you. It's I never would have thought it would have lasted this long. I would have thought I would have gotten divorced by the show.
It's a terrible show, so I wasn't expecting it to last.
Absolutely. Either. We just got lucky that nobody's listening, and nobody even people are like, "You're still on." And speaking of Spooky South Coast, the content director for the show, but he's also the author of Dark Woods, Cult, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest. Chris Balzano joins us. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. How is everybody doing this morning?
I would say spooktacular, but I have to save that for later on. And also,
well, I can say it. I'm spooktacular.
There you go. Also joining us on the line, we have Alan Alves, who is the retired Freetown detective who is involved in this as well as other crimes in the Freetown State Forest. Good morning, Alan. Thank you for joining us and for getting up early for us.
Good morning, guys. Happy to be here, I think.
Well, that's what happens when you're retired, right? You go into another field of work, and then, you think Saturday mornings are leisure time, but instead you've always got something going on.
Really, making your own hours is nice, but in morning there wasn't one of the hours.
Well, I wanted you guys to come on because, of course, this story came out earlier this week that James Cadieux died in prison. Not a surprise. I mean, he was an older man. He was, 70 years old.
Hey.
Well, but I mean, come on. When you get to be 70 years old in prison, I mean, that's pretty good in prison years. But this is one of those cases that I think is something that people always remember, kind of their where were they when they found out moment. And Alan, I'll ask you because you were probably the closest to this out of anybody. What was it like for you when you found out that this body had been discovered?
Well, when they called the police station, I got dispatched over there. Body tied to the tree in the forest. Being the fact that it was, November 11th, not too long after Halloween, I assumed that it's a Halloween dummy. It can't be a real person tied to the tree, headless person. And so I met these two young boys on dirt bikes, and at the gas station, and they said, take me up there. And I followed them. They were really shaken up. And they pointed at upwards in the forest, and it's up there about 100 yards. They didn't even want to go back there. So, I walked up the hill and got up there, and sure enough, there was a human torso tied to the body with twine and a head laying by its side. Later, I found out they took me the long way around because that's the only way they knew, but there was a dirt road there that you could get to it very easily.
Now, we had a woman who called in earlier this morning, and I have no reason to doubt her. She called in and said that she was actually riding horses with her friends out in the Freetown State Forest that day, and that they had actually ridden past Mary Lou Arruda tied to the tree first, and they thought the same thing, that it must have been something left over from Halloween. And it wasn't until they encountered those same young boys on the dirt bikes that they said, they were shaken up by it. They actually sent them to their house to call the police while they went back and kind of went over to the scene. And like I said, I have no reason to doubt her, and she sounded like like an older woman, so she was probably an adult at the time that this happened. But it just shows that, here you have people who were rocked by this, and something that just kind of, put a foothold on the entire community, that this kind of stuff could happen right in our own backyard.
Yeah, it was my first homicide, so it was very, it shook me up.
Now, one of the things, and Alan, while we have you, I want to ask you about this, because one of the things that has come up is a lot of the questions people have been asking me this morning is, why did it take 4 trials to finally keep Cater in prison for this crime? And one of the things that I know has come up as one of the problems was that some of the witnesses were under hypnosis, and confabulation was a problem. And you now running the South Coast Hypnosis Center, you're very well versed in hypnosis and how it works. How did that play into, James Cater being able to keep getting these appeals through and having the Supreme Court overturn these convictions?
Well, yeah, he had 4 tried for 5 trials. With he was a jailhouse attorney. When he went to jail, he just studied the law books and looked for every loophole he could. In regards to hypnosis, there was a witness. One of our witnesses remembered seeing that. Of course, the body was found 2 months after she was kidnapped. But a witness had indicated they saw a vehicle, a green vehicle with 2 parties in it. A male and a female. Thought it was a boyfriend girlfriend just fighting, going down that dirt road, and they know it was September 8th. 2 months prior, because it was, I don't know, their child's birthday or something like that, and they recalled it, and they wrote down the plate number, but they couldn't find the plate, what they wrote it down with, because it was 2 months later. Someone at that time suggested I bring it to a hypnotist, and I said, I'm a cop, I deal in facts, I don't deal with that hocus-pocus baloney. But lo and behold, I found a sergeant in Bridgewater, police officer, who was also a hypnotist. So we brought the witness there, and she was able to give a description of the vehicle and partial plate and a description of the person she saw, and it all matched up with Cater's vehicle, and picked up Cater out of the lineup, and so it was good. But then they kind of threw it out and made Commonwealth, and went all the way to the Supreme Court on that hypnosis thing, and it said hypnotic testimony cannot be used in court in Massachusetts, and there's a good reason for it. When you're they call it regression hypnosis, so you regress somebody back to a point in time to what we call the ISE, or the initial sensitizing event, and they recall it, but they only recall it as it's in their imagination mind. And that imagination mind can take detours. We use it a lot with children who are sexually molested. They're adults now, but they're having problems because they were molested as a child. We use a regression hypnosis back. And it could be their father that actually did it, but because they have this strong determination problem, love my father, yet hate what he did, that sometimes that subconscious mind will blame Uncle Joe, innocent Uncle Joe, rather than Dad in their mind. The memory will twist backs like that. So that's why they said they can't use it in court. But it's what you believe happened and what you remember, but it hasn't been proven to be, 100% accurate.
So, I mean, there must have been a feeling of relief on your part, though, when finally there were no more appeals, there were no more trials, and Cater was destined to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah, it wasn't so much for me, I think, but it was the family that had to go through it. They could never get closure, It was like opening up a new wound over and over every time there was a trial, and it was bad enough to lose a 15-year-old like that. And such a horrendous crime, heinous crime, and then have to relive it in court testimony time and time again over years and years. Horrible for family.
And I know I saw, your reaction when I posted the story up on Facebook, and I know that, you personally have always felt, even with all these other trials and all this other, attempts by the defense team to try and find another scapegoat to blame rather than Cater, you've always stuck by that it was definitely him. What did you think about their problem that they had, the defense team, where they accused the Freetown police of holding back the cult information that they felt could have actually helped to clear James Cater?
Well, with the Freetown police, it was Alan Alves that were claiming they brought that up. I had to be cross-examined like that. It had absolutely nothing to do with that case. Satanic cult, devil worship had nothing to do with that. Yes, we did find a cross and some twine. The twine did not match in any way, shape, or form with the twine that was tied around Mary Lou Arruda. There was a men's underwear that was found at that scene, and the scene was a mile away. There was no evidence of any homicide or anything. It was just little blood spots there, and there was a cross there. We found there was ritualistic, satanic stuff going on there all the time. I got third-hand information through informants about the stuff that was going on over there with the cross and so forth, and all the graffiti and so forth. There was absolutely no graffiti or anything related to Satanism at the Mary Lou Arruda scene whatsoever, and I'm totally convinced that Cater acted on his own. He was responsible. There was no cult involved, and when it was brought up to court, 12 jurors also found the same thing.
Especially whereas, he'd admitted to doing the same thing to somebody else, but the other girl just happened to have escaped. Yeah,
he did it actually 10 years prior, and he had just gotten out. He was only out 2 years when this happened.
Yeah, so, I mean, that just looks like, I don't know how you can argue guilt in that case. But, well, Alan, thank you. I know that, you've got your day ahead of you, so I thank you for joining us and for shedding some light onto this from a historical basis and giving people the actual fact instead of all the rumors that have been circulating over the last, 40 years.
Yeah, very good. But I'm glad he's rotting in hell right now.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. You have a good one, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, very good. Nice. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. We'll have to have you back on the Saturday night show sometime. We always have a lot of fun with you when you come in. So.
Cool.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. And, of course, we can always bring Alan on and talk about hypnosis, which is something that I'm fascinated by. But Chris and Aaron, I just wanted to get, I wanted to have Aaron give Alan some time to share before, he had to get on with his day. But, in terms of the actual impact of this, Chris, when you were putting together the book, you have to now take what happened in this case and put it into context of everything that's gone on in the Freetown State Forest. And it's kind of amazing that it's an area that you would think that, okay, one murder would make it, nefarious. But the fact that it's had numerous like this, did you find that there were a lot of people that didn't want you to tell this story? There were a lot of people that didn't want to have to bring this back up?
Well, it was interesting because when I first started to uncover information and when I first started talking to Alan, and then other people subsequently that I spoke with, they would talk about rumors, they would talk about whispers they had heard, they would talk about these connections, but Cater was always very much like, nope, he acted alone, there's no connection whatsoever. I mean, he truly was like this boogeyman who was separate from the other things that were going on in the Freetown State Forest. And whether it was cult-related or whether it was kind of a symptom of the evil in the Freetown State Forest, I thought that he was definitely an important part of the myth. Like, everyone was very quick to deny that he had any connection to any cult whatsoever, which I don't firmly believe. But even if that were the case, there were still circumstances around it that kind of led into the bigger picture of what was going on in the Freetown State Forest and what still goes on.
And Aaron, when you're putting together the film, and naturally you knew that this had to be part of that story because of the lasting impact that it's had, I imagine that you probably encountered a lot of the same things, a lot of people kind of feeling the same way.
Yeah, and, we kind of, number one, because of the sensitivity of that case, we gave it a very brief summary in the film. We actually didn't try to tie it to any kind of cult theory. We actually tried to separate the two in the documentary, but I am aware that, there are some people that aren't completely convinced that there wasn't some sort of a tie-in there. But it was one of the big things that we tried to dispel is that at least there was no connection between the James Cater case and the Carl Drew Robin Murphy case, which is a common misconception. And sometimes when people talk about that Carl Drew Robin Murphy case, they'll say, yeah, isn't that the guy that killed that Mary Lou Arruda? And you have to just say, whoa,
Right.
no, it's a separate case. They're two unrelated things. And so because they both happened, 1978, 1979, those cases are often confused with one another, and then you add in, 10 years later, the New Bedford Highway murders, those get confused with those two cases. So you have those three cases kind of flying around that people that aren't familiar with them confuse them with one another quite a bit.
I mean, it's just a terrible thing that, such a beautiful spot, although it does have its its atmosphere, its feelings, but that such a beautiful spot has been used so terribly over the years. And Chris, we talked a little bit about the bigger picture earlier this morning. I mentioned it a little bit, but you feel that there's kind of there's a power there. There's something there that draws this type of activity, that draws this type of negativity.
I do, and I think that that's why, if anything, if there is no cult connection, and I'm not convinced, I think there are some details around the case that hint at something, and like Aaron said, not connected to any of the other cases from that area, although connected to some cases from the Middlesex and Essex County, some information from that area. But either way, I think that Cater was pulled there. I think that Cater was pulled by the energy that exists within the forest. There are other places where he could have, that he passed, that he could have dumped or done whatever he needed to do, and yet something was calling him to the Freetown State Forest, the way it calls other negative aspects or other negative things into it. I firmly believe that there's something evil about that place, and I think it draws that stuff in. When I was writing Darkwood, I always say it began with a question: are these crimes, which are often disproportionate, the violence within them and the details within them are awfully disproportionate to the situation? Why are these happening here? And Alan, if we gave him more time, would discuss its proximity to cities and the ease with which you can get in and out of the forest with very little knowledge to dump what you need to dump. But I think it's also something more than that. I think that the forest calls to people, and then those cases become part of the lore of the area and kind of feed back into it, and it becomes, a perpetual kind of cycle of drawing things in and then kind of using what's going on to feed itself. And I know that's very, as Alan would say, hocus pocusy, but those people who have worked within the forest, those people who are connected to it, they have those unexplained things. Even if they can explain or they can dismiss paranormal stuff that happens, or this case or that case, or this murder or this assault that happened there, they always seem to have this underlining question, though, of why the details of it are the way they are, and people who are in the forest feel stuff. They feel that kind of stuff working within it when they're there, even if they're going there for very positive reasons.
And Aaron, I know you don't buy into a lot of the hocus pocus stuff either, but and it's probably more because of knowing what happened there, but there is kind of that feeling there that, and you spent a lot of time out in the forest and filming the documentary. Can you understand why it becomes such a drawing point for this type of activity?
Oh, absolutely. If I could, I apologize to the viewers if you could hear my 3-year-old daughter in the background at any point. It was my day to get up.
You mean future Oscar-winning documentarian?
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing I've ever had to a paranormal occurrence or experience in my life occurred in the Freetown State Forest while filming Chris Balzano's interview for the film, and Chris was right there and witnessed it himself and was part of it. It was pretty amazing. So I can definitely understand how people tie in the Mary Lou Arruda case to the myth and lore of the Freetown State Forest, and there's no denying that that forest, which is in a sleepy town of 9,000 people, has seen a disproportionate amount of bizarre crime. And so I definitely can see where people are coming from with that. And just an interesting aside, that scene from the film, actually, you don't even need to own the film to see that scene. If you wanted to check it out on YouTube just to get more of a sense of what we're talking about, that entire scene is uploaded as just like a bonus thing. People can just check it out just to see what the documentary has to offer. But I'm not saying for that reason. I'm just saying if somebody is listening today and wants a synopsis on that case, that whole entire scene's on YouTube. You don't even need to buy the rest of the film.
But they can do so by going to BridgewaterTriangle.com, and they can get the film both in physical form with a Blu-ray or a DVD, or they can watch it on demand online, and they can also get Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest at their local bookstores or from Amazon. And, make sure that we plug that so that people can find out more about the case.
Well, yeah, and like I said, they can see that scene on YouTube as well. But yeah, it's definitely tied into the myth and lore of the Freetown State Forest, and there is something about that forest, whether it be something supernatural or whether it be its geographical location, that does seem to draw in this sinister human element. I mean, there's a section in the film where we talk about other crimes, actually true crimes that have happened there. A homeless drifter was taken out there and shot. Was mistaken as a drug dealer, I believe. There were two men that were shot in their car on Bell Rock Road. There was a newborn infant that was left and died of exposure in the Freetown State Forest. There's been mob hit bodies found out there. So it definitely, without a doubt, is a draw for crime and criminal activity. And what the explanation for that is, there are a lot of different theories out there, and it's interesting to think about. And it definitely is as you say in the documentary, Tim, a darker. Actually, I think it's Chris that said it. It's a darker place. Either one of you said. I'm not sure.
Well, either way, whichever one of us said it, we're right. We always are. All right.
If it's not good, it was me.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and certainly people can read the book and watch the film and find out more. Thank you so much, and Chris, we'll talk to you tonight, and Aaron, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys, and I apologize for the background noise again.
Nah, no problem at all.
Thanks, Tim, and I apologize for Aaron's background noise.
All right, guys, take care. That is Aaron.
Have a great day.
You too. Aaron Cadieux and Chris Balzano joining us to talk about the Mary Lou Arruda case, the death of Mary Lou Arruda, and the death this week of her convicted killer, James Cater, in prison.